Have you ever fallen out of love? It's a tough feeling. Things you used to worship, things you used to obsess with, just doesn't hit anymore. That happened to me a lot of times, and today I am going to tell you about all 8 of them. I was recently just cleaning up my playlist on Spotify and going through my liked songs, and I realized that a lot of songs that I have liked are songs that I barely ever get to nowadays. And, you know, it's hard to get to everything you've ever listened to. You know, the more you listen to things, the more things you have to listen to, and naturally, some artists you just simply kind of push to the side. And eventually, if you don't revisit them long enough, they just disappear from your rotation completely. So today I wanted to show you which bands disappeared from my rotation. Which bands I've fallen out of love with, so to speak. And I'm gonna start with Bad Omens. I had a pretty huge phase with Bad Omens a few years back, especially when they dropped a Finding God Before God Finds You album. I think that was kind of the album that brought me into this band initially. You know, a lot of people were obsessing over them since they're self-titled in 2016. That was kind of their big debut, but Finding God Before God Finds You was the album that brought me into that bandwagon. And I have to say, even revisiting this album quite recently, I find a lot of joy in it. I find a lot of nostalgia towards it, even though it hasn't dropped that long ago. It was only like 5 years ago. This was pre-COVID. And of course, years later, they dropped The Death of Peace of Mind, which was their big breakthrough, absolutely massive breakthrough, hundreds of millions of listens, massive shows, world tours. And I like that album. I do. I have a positive review on it on my channel. But since that album came out, I've been listening to Bad Omens less and less. And listen, this might come up later, but maybe I do have a little bit of that syndrome where if something becomes popular, more popular than it used to be, then I lose interest over it because it's mainstream. I desperately don't want to come across as that person, but looking at my little list I've compiled, there's a bit of a common thread. But Bad Omens is the first band on this list. My interest towards them since The Death of Peace of Mind just kind of fizzled away. I've seen them live, I've seen what they can do, and I moved on to different genres and different styles. Another band I've been absolutely obsessed with for a very long time, and I used to listen to them every day. And the band that I don't listen to anymore almost at all is Sleep Token. Sleep Token is a phenomenon that overtook the scene last year. Starting in January, quite literally in the beginning of the year, throughout it, with the world tours, even this year, it's been incredible how much success this band garnered. I started listening to this band around the same time as Bad Omens, 2019-ish, pre-COVID. Sundowning was the album that I got introduced to this band with, and specifically the song The Offering, which I'm sure a lot of you may relate to that. And the Sundowning was just an absolute behemoth for me at the time. I was obsessed with every single fiber of that album. Every single month when they dropped a new song in the build up to the final release was really something I was following. There's actually a bit of a story with how the last song of this album, Bloodsport, dropped in December in a very ominously perfect time, sealed the deal for me as to why this band was so important to me back then. Like, it felt like that was one of those albums that understood me as much as I understood it. To me, that was like the full-on dive point where I was like, I'm in this band. I'm into it. I'm into everything they're doing. And back then, Sleep Token was fairly unknown. I mean, their singles were blowing up, but nowhere near the amount of blowing up as they are doing nowadays. And to me that was cool because, like, oh my god, we've discovered a gem, this new band out of nowhere. And then, you know, 2021 rolls around, This Place Will Become Your Tomb comes out. Initially, to me, that album was much weaker. As time went on, I realized how wrong I was in my initial assessment because I absolutely fell in love with the Tomb album. And then last year, in 2023, the band rolled out one of the craziest blowing up phenomenons in metal history by dropping Chokehold, The Summoning, and eventually Take Me Back to Eden album, which I personally did not enjoy that much. And I've explained this in a separate video where I kind of went over all 3 of these albums and ranked them. So if you want to see specifically that, There you go. That was the kind of breaking off point for me with the band, and unfortunately I've started listening to them less and less and less. Of course, it has to do with different types of music, different genres I listen to nowadays that are not very similar to what Sleep Token is doing. That is what it is. Sleep Token is another band on this list. While She Sleeps is another band I was completely obsessed with at one point, and well, not anymore. My initial introduction to this band was Silence Speaks, featuring Oliver Sykes. That song was huge. That song was everything to me. This was back in 2016, 2017-ish. You Are We was the first truly album by While She Sleeps that I fully just dove into. This was before I was making reaction videos. This was before I was taking this channel seriously. So this was a long ass time ago. I was a different person. And then they dropped a new album. 2019 rolled around with So What, which was another album that I really liked and I really listened to quite a bit. And then Sleep Society drops a few years later, an album that I also enjoyed, but a bit less. This year, Self Hell dropped, which was my least favorite of the While She Sleeps albums, and it's not to say that it was necessarily bad, but it kind of continued the downward trend as to whether I like the band or not, and I just stopped liking them as much. It's another one of those cases where the band just kind of was writing music that I wasn't interested in, and it just kind of aligned perfectly with me slowly fizzling out my interest towards it. So it is sad. I still do enjoy While She Sleeps. Brainwashed album was something I checked out retroactively. Four Walls is top 5 metalcore songs ever made. But yeah, While She Sleeps is another one. Another band that is kind of a similar case is August Burns Red. August Burns Red was at one point my most listened to artist. I think it's my second most listened to artist at the moment, still to this point, just to illustrate how much in love I was with this band. And, you know, it all came from the Phantom Anthem album. That was the album that brought me into the sound, brought me into the band, the vibe. Diving into Phantom Anthem, that album really took me for a spin. It brought me back to their older albums, Found in Faraway Places, Rescue and Restore, Constellations especially. Constellations is my probably favorite album by them. My interest towards them peaked when they remastered and remixed Constellations album in 2019. This was their 10-year anniversary of that album, and I went to see them live where they played that entire album in full, and that shit was crazy good. That was my peak of interest towards August Burns Red, and ever since then everything kind of went downhill with them for me. Guardians 2020 album was okay, and I did like it at first, but I just realized I haven't listened to it as much. Same thing happened with their most recent album last year, Death Below. I barely remember anything from Death Below specifically. Guardians, I remember a few songs. Death Below, I don't remember that album at all. Another similar case is, I guess, Killswitch Engage. I initially got into this band around the same time as everything else on this list, which is 2016, which is the time where I was getting into the whole metalcore thing. And I got into Incarnate, the album that they dropped in 2016. And this was a similar case to August Burns Red, where I went back and listened to everything this band ever dropped, and I was just completely engulfed in, you know, the End of Heartache, the As Daylight Dies, you know, everything with Howard Jones. I was so invested into Killswitch Engage. They dropped an album, Atonement, in 2019, which, again, was an album that I did enjoy initially, but noticed that I just never really came back to. Like, almost nothing from that album is on my playlist anymore. And I barely listen to Killswitch Engage in general, including their like all-time classics, The End of Heartache, you know, Holy Diver cover, My Curse. You know, these are all songs that I would love to listen to at any given point, but aren't the songs I willingly seek to listen to, if that makes sense. Now, this one is controversial, but hear me out. The Devil Wears Prada. Oh my god. I was so fucking obsessed with this band. Started listening to them not in 2010 or 2009 or 2006 when they were dropping their biggest hits, but in 2019, where arguably they dropped their most underwhelming in terms of numbers album. The Act to me was really big because Again, it was a weird time in my life where I was liking everything edgy and unusual and weird. And the act really ticked off a lot of those boxes for me. I fell in love with the dark aesthetic of that record. I fell in love with the cover art, the music videos. I fell in love with the song Chemical. I never really got into their older albums, funny enough, with Roots Above and Branches Below, Plagues. I never really got into those albums as much. There are a few songs that I like, but as a whole, for me, Transit Blues, the act, was the era of the band that I liked the most. And then 2022 rolls around, and you all know what happened in 2022. The Bogdan HXC glaze of The Devil Wears Prada Color Decay needs to be studied. Oh my god, I was so obsessed with that album. That was the peak. That was the peak for sure of my interest in the band. And, you know, it won Album of the Year for me. Everyday album run, complete from start to finish. It was crazy. I guess it's one of those that I listened to it too much, so it stopped being interesting to me. But, you know, eventually, I just stopped listening to them as much. And I guess it is the case of over listening to something. You know, don't do that. Don't do that. If you really like something, don't listen to that exclusively, because you're going to over listen to it and you're going to start hating it. And while I don't hate The Devil Wears Prada, I certainly don't love Color Decay as much as I used to. Bonus band on this list before we jump into the big one, Ice Nine Kills. Ice Nine Kills was also a big obsession of mine in 2015-ish. I guess around the time when I was getting into metalcore. Every Trick in a Book was the first album I listened to by them. And that album was huge for me. I loved all the book references. I love all the horror elements. It was a bit goofy. The music videos were very low budget and goofy and funny. And then The Silver Scream rolled around in 2018, which was just everything but better and bigger. And I loved that album a lot. And then everything peaked with Welcome to Horrorwood. I think definitely that's my peak of interest towards Ice Nine Kills. I was fucking so in love with Welcome to Horrorwood, everything about it. I listened to it back to back, every song. To me, all those movie references, all the movies they've used, they chose to cover in their album was just really, really nice. And ever since then, I started listening to them less and less. The story repeats. I listen to an album, I love it so much that I just listen to it too much. I go see them live, boom, no interest anymore. I don't know, it's crazy. Does anyone else have this happen to them? Anyways, final band. I know I've been yapping a lot, but this is the big one, and the one that I kind of think kickstarted the idea of this video, but it's Architects. Architects is my most listened to artist on Spotify of all time. And to illustrate it, here's a chart, obviously you're seeing it. Architects, like for many people, used to be one of the main answers to a question, what is your favorite metalcore band out there? To me, Architects were untouchable around 2016, 2017. Obviously, everything started with All Our Gods Have Abandoned Us. That was the first album I listened to by them. The story of Tom Searle's passing really touched me. That was something I felt really connected towards and felt really sad about. You know, it was kind of a weird timing, because that was the time when I was getting into the band, and then a few months later, boom, the news. But I kept listening to the band. The more you know, they're my most listened to artist now. And then 2018, a few years later, they drop Holy Hell, which was the first album without Tom. That was, I think, the peak for me. That was the peak of my interest towards Architects. I listened to that album religiously. Maybe the most religiously out of everything I've listed in this video so far. Mortal After All, or Modern Misery, or Dying to Heal. Like literally every single song on that album was on my playlist, and every single one was equally getting attention from me. It's quite ridiculous, honestly. Like, I can't name you an album, not even Heaven or not even Color Decay, because, you know, the numbers don't lie. That album was the biggest for me. I remember just listening to that so much and not being tired of it. The similar story almost happened, you know, interest fizzled out slowly over time. But they did drop an album in 2021 called For Those That Wish to Exist, which was a very controversial album. But it was an album that I still enjoyed quite a bit. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that I got my beautiful girlfriend to get me this beautiful gift for my birthday last year. And so, yeah, For Those That Wish to Exist was still an album I listened to quite a bit, actually. You know, even compared to a lot of my peak albums of the bands on this list, this still was ahead, which is the crazy part, you know. After that, 2021, all the way to the classic Symptoms of a Broken Spirit, which I just did not understand. 2022 album by Architects was a complete miss for me. A complete miss. Like, not a single song of that record I think I've listened to in like the last 2 years. Not a single one. I kid you not, I maybe had them pop up on shuffle, but it just doesn't happen nowadays. I listened to Architects a little bit, but again, that kind of breaking point meant for me that I just am not really interested in Architects anymore. And that's that. I've shared with you some of the biggest, most prominent occasions on which I used to love a band and then I just stopped, to the point where I haven't listened to many of these bands in months or even years. But I would love to hear your examples of this happening. I assume, you know, this is a pretty common thing. We listen to so many songs every day, every year. We discover so many new bands, and it's bound to happen. You know, bands you used to love just kind of going into the background. These were my picks. I would love to hear your picks, so let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see more of these talking videos where I'm explaining something and you just hear me talk at you, let me know in the comments. I would love to make more of these and suggest topics if you'd like, what you'd like me to talk about. But that is all from me. I'm gonna go drink some water because my throat hurts. I've been talking for 30 minutes. Anyways, love you all. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, like, comment for engagement. Do all the crazy cool stuff in the links in the description. Join the Discord, join Patreon, see me live on Twitch. But that is all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.